All right, we're going to watch a video about the dead internet theory. I think I have a pretty loose understanding of what that is. Let's watch a video together and find out. This is by The Pursuit of Wonder on YouTube.
This video is sponsored by the online personal information removal service, Incogni. Protect your data and personal information from data brokers and search sites. Use my link in the description to get 60% off Incogni's annual plan. On Tuesday, December 15th, 1970, Season 2, Episode 12 aired of the comedy sketch show Monty Python's Flying Circus. The title of the episode was Spam. In the episode, there is a sketch, also titled Spam, in which a husband and wife are lowered on wires into a cafe filled with Vikings. Once sat, the husband and wife ask the waitress about the meals available at the cafe. The waitress proceeds to describe each menu item to the couple. Nearly every item has the canned meat, Spam, in it. Some dishes are just Spam with multiple sides of Spam. Spam, 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 egg, and Spam. One dish is described as. When the woman customer declares that she does not like Spam and she wants a meal without any, the waitress denies her request, and suddenly the Vikings around them begin to sing, Spam, 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 lovely Spam, wonderful Spam. The interaction devolves further and further as the Vikings' chants and waitress's screams in support of Spam increase, droning out the conversation into indiscernible absurdity.
Now that is product placement done the right way. You know that they made a little bit of moolah, right? But I think I'm getting the concept where this is going.
Then, the sketch essentially ends, and the customer, we can reasonably assume, does not get a meal without Spam in it.
That's the important part of it.
Although this Monty Python sketch had nothing to do with media or the internet, it would strangely and powerfully foreshadow forthcoming conditions of media and the internet, and it would ultimately lead directly to the term spam being used in internet vernacular. In the context of media and the internet, the term spam broadly refers to excessive, irrelevant, unwanted, insincere, or repeated communication or content. As a result of the Monty Python sketch, in the 1980s, in early online chat rooms, message boards, and virtual games, users would repeatedly type spam along with other quotes from the Monty Python sketch
Wow,
in
the
order to
origin of the
knock
word
the text
spam, that's
of other
crazy.
unwanted users or competitors down and off screen and gatekeep discourse. Around the same time, the term spam would also come to be used to refer to the repeated and excessive posting of the same messages on file and message sharing networks. Of course, it only helps and is all the more fitting that Spam, the canned meat, is highly processed and unhealthy, high in calories, fat, and sodium, and low in nutrients.
I don't know if anybody eats Spam nowadays. When I was younger, I remember my grandma used to give me like those little hot dog things, and you couldn't pay me all the money in the world to give those to my kids now.
Since the 1980s, media and the internet have, of course, evolved tremendously. Between 1981 and 1989, the number of hosts connected to the internet went from hundreds to hundreds of thousands, with an increase from 80,000 to over 160,000 hosts in 1989 alone. Also in 1989, the World Wide Web was created, which, for the first time, made digital content easily reachable and shareable for the average consumer. By the mid-1990s, there were over 100,000 websites on the web. Around 40% of American households owned a computer, which was just 15% a couple years prior. Suddenly, new opportunities for connection and creativity abounded. For the first time in history, individuals could easily message people across the world in chats, publish and share their art and homemade videos, create
Share their art. And dick pics.
digital profiles in digital stores, purchase and download things like movies and books, order physical goods to be delivered to their home, and innumerable other
Meet their
unbelievable
wives.
and world-changing acts.
And their
Now,
ex-wives.
as of 2024, it's estimated that around 70% of the global population owns a smartphone. That's roughly 5 billion people. It's also now estimated that there are well over 1 billion websites, and the average person currently spends around 6 hours and 35 minutes online every day. Needless to say,
Recreationally or at
the
work, too?
internet and internet devices have fully consumed us, and the conditions of the internet are crucially important to the human experience. Of course, along with new opportunities for the distribution of enriching things on the internet, so too have new opportunities for the distribution of problems and hazardous content evolved on the internet, one of which is spam and spam-like media. For For the sake of clarity, spam and spam-like media here includes anything from unwanted emails all the way to digital content that unreasonably exploits platform algorithms, automation, and/or excessive posting, often for the sole purpose of views and engagement. The problem of spam might appear somewhat trivial at first, especially when considered against much darker activities and possibilities on the internet. But the increasing development and thriving of spam-like media points to a deep, holistic problem about the current architecture and future of the internet and humanity at large. The internet, in its current form, does not merely have spam on the menu. The menu is, in many ways, increasingly that of the Monty Python Cafe. All menu items on offer seem to contain spam in some form. And worse, our palates seem to be increasingly burnt and numb by this to actually desire it, to enjoy less and less of the nuanced flavors that we previously did. As both creators and consumers of media, many of us seem to want quicker, easier, and more processed content, which often doesn't challenge or require much of us, and we are increasingly willing to ignore the intentions and consequences of said content.
You ever feel that way when you're on social media and you're just... It's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because there's sometimes like when you're looking at memes, right? Like I enjoy looking at work memes, right? They make me laugh because I'm like, man, it's cool to see that other people feel the exact same way that I feel. And sometimes it feels like so specific to a particular situation that I could be going through, and it makes me feel better. I'm like, oh man, that's so funny that other people deal with that same sort of thing. But then also there comes a point, and maybe it was because I took a little break from social media for a while, but like you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've seen this all. I've seen a version of this all, and like you almost feel like you're like, man, I've literally seen everything that there is to see on the internet. I've seen enough fails. I've seen enough whatever. And you're like, man, oh man, it just feels very, very, I guess, spammy, repetitive.
Inspired and led by philanthropic beasts, herds of Viking creators chase watch time as audiences welcome the pillaging with eager eyes. There is a theory about the internet that has recently garnered increasing notoriety, largely as a result of the mainstream introduction and popularization of generative AI. The theory is known as the dead internet theory. The origins of the theory primarily trace back to an anonymous thread created in 2021 on the Agora Rhodes Macintosh Cafe forum. Its origins, specifics, and conspiratorial nature are rather questionable, but the broad sentiment, at least now, feels somewhat valid. Putting aside the conspiratorial and paranoid claims of the theory, most broadly, the theory suggests that most online activity is fake in some way, either bot activity or AI-generated content created and curated by algorithms. Because of this, according to the theory, the internet, as a source of unbridled human activity and flourishing, died somewhere around the year 2016. In that same year of 2016, a cybersecurity company by the name of Imperva in fact did find that bots, or software applications that perform automated tasks without human intervention, accounted for over half of all online activity.
Holy
They also
shit.
found that around 30% of website visits likely came from bad bots, or programs designed to carry out harmful actions like theft and hacking. The other roughly 20% of bots, however, were found to be good bots, or bots that help monitor and upkeep aspects of the internet. This was nearly 10 years ago. We can more than reasonably assume that those numbers have gone up since then. Of course, these percentages include the entire internet in all corners and pockets, so it's not necessarily the case that the majority of the content and websites you personally consume and visit are fake, assuming you engage in reasonably well-curated and stable websites and platforms. But the point is, no matter who you are, how savvy you are, and what you do on the internet, there is no avoiding fake content and fake traffic, and even more so, there is certainly no avoiding spam-like content.
Wow, this is pretty heavy. When you think about it, right? If that was 50% back then, like the numbers have to go up. The thing is about AI that I've thought about before is that like AI is trained on data that we created, right? So like what it's trying to do, a lot of times people think right now that AI is a lot more intelligent than it actually is. When really most of these things are just like large language models where they're going, okay, what's the next predictive thing that they want to see based on the text that we start, right? And so like what they're trying to do is just like, this makes sense from how communication works to just, recognize patterns and give them what they think we want. And all of that is trained on stuff that humans already have done in the way that we've communicated and the information that we've put onto the internet. But the more and more that we rely on artificial intelligence to write our papers, to write our websites, to write our scripts, the more that like it's just going to be like a feedback loop, right? Where it's just like AI is creating media that AI is then going to learn off of and create more. And so like there's really going to be like this spot where like AI, I feel like in general is just like not going to grow anymore as well. So a lot of this, you know, growth of like, you know, artificial media that's going to be created. Now the algorithms and stuff, I think there's probably still a lot of growth that can happen there where like they're going to get super specific and, you know, like be able to create things themselves based on our own habits. I think there's still a lot of growth in that area where it's going to be super specific, where the videos that you watch, the memes that you see, you know, you'll have a couple friends scattered in, you know, with pictures of their kids and whatever, but the majority, what it seems like now, it seems like already half based on this video, is going to be things that are just like created, generated, and shown to you by algorithms and, you know, created by these like AI. But I just wonder at what point when that feedback loop becomes to the point where, you know, all creativity is being done through AI, that if we're not going to have like, again, like another like sort of like human revolution where we're going to like be so bored and so uncreative and so stale because we are just getting the same thing fed back to us over and over again, that maybe that's where humans, you know, and the human mind might be creative enough to kind of like break that cycle again and just start creating things where AI is like, whoa, what in the hell is that? You know, again, it's hard for us to even conceptualize what that might be because all of the art and different things that we've created so far have already been built into these algorithms. But I just haven't given up on human creativity yet.
This year, in 2024, Jack Conte, the founder and CEO of the creator monetization platform Patreon, gave a keynote at the conference South by Southwest titled Death of the Follower and the Future of Creativity on the Web. The focus of his presentation was primarily on the development and effects of algorithmic feeds on social media and content distribution platforms. Specifically, Conte's argument is that major platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok have moved primarily into algorithmic ranking-based content distribution feeds and away from follow-based feeds. In other words, internet content is distributed based on computer algorithms that rank content using metrics of engagement like watch time, and not based on people selectively and intentionally curating what is shown to them based on who they follow or subscribe to.
I felt like there was a big shift in that because, again, I took a little break from social media for a little while. It was right around COVID time. Things were just getting so weird. I felt just kind of icky, you know, seeing the fights and, you know, the confusion and stuff. And I kind of wanted to be a little more clear-headed and make my own decisions around that. So I stepped back from social media in like 2020, and I came back, you know, 2024, really, at the beginning of this year. And I didn't notice that big time, like even in things like Facebook, where I felt like Facebook used to be like, okay, cool, there's some things that I like, you know, like, cool, I like the Detroit Red Wings, click, add, I have my friends here, and everything was very close to that, and mostly the things that I followed. When I came back onto Facebook, just was like surprised by how many things that had like nothing to do with my interest. Not that I didn't enjoy it, which might be even a little weirder, was like, you know, like, oh, you know what I like, even though that's not, I haven't shown you that, but you're putting together patterns based on what other people have liked that are like me, I guess. But, you know, I was surprised at how many things came through that I'm like, man, I didn't add this. Like, why is this here? And it's like the majority of my stuff. And I thought at first it was because I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's just because I haven't added a lot of things yet because I'm like fresh back in. I haven't added all of my friends and family back and all of the pages that I used to file or used to follow back yet. And so they were kind of just filling that gap. But even as I continue to just add more and more people and pages that I'm interested in, you know, that still remains the same where I'm like, man, it feels like the majority of the things are just like, again, some sort of algorithm trying to, showing me things that like I didn't choose.
As a result, according to Conti, this has caused content creators and their audiences to become increasingly pulled apart. In my opinion, Conti says, the follow is not some handy feature of a social network. The follow is foundational architecture for human creativity and organization. With the follow becoming less central to content distribution, content creators increasingly need to create for an algorithm rather than for a clear audience or fan base. Conti says, for the first time since Web 2.0, my followers might not necessarily see my posts, and the idea of a subscription started to break down. If a person doesn't receive the thing I make, it's not really a direct true connection between a creator and their fans. It's not really a subscription. The channel of distribution is broken, and it creates another problem too around creative freedom, because now suddenly my post has to be better than the other posts according to a set of criteria that I don't know or have control of, or even agree with. So instead of thinking, what do I want to make? What lights me up? What is the output that I want to create as an artist? What will my fans love? Instead of thinking about those questions, now, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what will the ranking algorithm favor? And that, subconsciously or consciously, changes my creative output to achieve the platform's goals, not my goals as a creator.
To be fair, though, I agree with, okay, that makes sense. And I'm not discrediting what he's saying. That does make sense. But also, I think this has been going on for a while, because how much of what we create or do is for other people's approval anyways? Like if I went and wore what I was comfortable with to work, I'd be wearing some freaking sweatpants and a t-shirt, and, I wouldn't do my hair or put on a hat, and I would just be, stumbling in, whatever. But like right now, it's like, hey, I have to try to get likes, it's almost like fitting into that algorithm sort of thing. And same thing with like Facebook and stuff. Like, I think that for a while now, like, I like the idea of like, hey, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do without the thought of what other people think. And if you like it, here, subscribe to me, subscribe to my ideas and my creativity. I think for a long time, that a lot of people just like don't do that. And that's hard to do, because a lot of times people are like, oh, what's popular right now? What do people care about? Because they want to, you're competing with so much other entertainment that like you have to jump into those like little canals of creativity. Like, okay, well, that's what people like. I have to, like, I can be creative in that a little bit. Like, hey, everybody wants to eat pizza and I'm a good cook. Like, I can make like, oh man, like a special pizza, or make my pizza, try to make my pizza a little bit better. But if you're just trying to feed people something that they don't want to eat, people aren't going to subscribe either. That makes sense.
The primary goal for almost all social media platforms is to make money. The primary means of achieving this goal for most platforms is through advertising revenue. And the primary means of generating, sustaining, and growing ad revenue is by attracting as many users to the platform and then keeping users on the platform as long as possible. At the scale of major social media platforms, algorithmic-based ranking feeds seems to achieve this the best. As a result, algorithms have increasingly taken control over what we see and the
They gotta
direction in
use
which
that
online
picture.
media and content goes.
Those
We are
pictures.
thus being increasingly led by these algorithms with no clear aim in terms of benefit to the individual or
Feed
culture at
me.
large. The cause and endgame are merely
Are they
profitability.
gonna eat those guys?
Of course, algorithms are not inherently bad, and they could provide great opportunities for things like discoverability for creators and consumers. Furthermore, pursuing watch time in algorithms isn't inherently always bad either, as it can be useful for improving one's work. But a major problem is, under these conditions, one of the forms of media and content that prospers is either full-on spam or media that has a flavor of spam to it. In order to appease algorithms and either forge or maintain a career and social relevancy, creators might change their content format, category, or topics from what they are primarily interested in to what's popular and what works, often leading to blatant copying, repetitiveness, redundancy, dumbing down, carelessness, or excessively frequent posting. Otherwise, they might risk inevitably being overlooked by the algorithms and forgotten by anyone who is not in their most core audience.
Yep.
These problems of fake traffic, algorithmic disconnect, and spam media have only become...
What do you guys think about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, you know? Like, are they really in love?
Become increasingly worse with the introduction and mainstream use of generative AI. Now, AI models can message humans in chats and message other AI models, create digital art and video content, create and manage digital profiles in stores, determine and execute purchases and economic decisions, as well as innumerable other unbelievable and world-changing acts. But now, humans are less and less involved. Hence, the internet is, at least in the way it once was, dead. In its wake, a new sort of internet is emerging. What this new form will ultimately become, how it will feel, what help and harm, positives and negatives it might cause, will only be known in time. But what does appear to be certain is that AI is only going to get better, and the problems of disconnection, fakeness, and spam-like media are only going to get worse. Of course, generative AI is not all bad, and there are countless great applications for it, both currently and foreseeably. But if we are not careful,
That's the tricky part.
more than anything else, our digital diets will continue to become unhealthier and unhealthier. It will be increasingly difficult to hear and make sense of anything, to want to hear and make sense of anything, to find and get what we want to order. It is not hopeless, though. Hopefully, in time, there will be reasonable regulations around AI and internet media. Hopefully, new technologies will also help mitigate against some of the existing and forthcoming problems and execute effectively on reasonable policies and cultural expectations.
The problem with policies and regulations with things that are going to be used in such a global way is that you might be throttling something that other countries and other places won't give a shit about the regulation or policy, and it might put us at a disadvantage, right? We think about that with like climate change and different things. Like we can do all these like green initiatives all that we want and feel good about ourselves and be like, yeah, look at America, we're so clean, but then we send all of our like garbage to China and then they just burn it. You know, where it's like, okay, we can feel the same way about these like policies and stuff, but then if China's using these things, first of all, it's like the most tech savvy are going to find ways, you know, through VPNs and whatever to use and exploit the AI the way that they want if there are the regulations here in America, because it'd be so hard to get all of the countries. You know, if we could get all 200 and whatever countries there are in the world to agree to a lot of these things, well, man, then you can actually like save the world from certain things like this sort of deal, or like climate change, which I think is like the attempt when you think about like the different summits and stuff that they have, trying to bring everybody into the same sort of policies and stuff. But there's always going to be like your adversarial countries, right? It's like you're always going to have your UK and United States, and then you're always going to have like your Russia and China, where they're going to be like, hey, why don't we kind of do what works for us over here? They can do what they want to do over there, you know? And not that they don't have the same, that they can't have the same sort of like foresight that we have and go like, oh, okay, this is obviously going to be bad. You know, this could affect us negatively in the same way. So we're not just going to have it be unregulated and have it hurt our society because we want to be adversarial to America. But at the same time, there'll always be like those, those outliers, you know, that just aren't going to get on board or just don't even have the capability to like maintain those regulations. So.
If history is to be considered, it seems that this is certainly on the table of possibilities. But of course, if history is to be considered, regulations and new technologies designed to restrain bad actors and bad technologies are always, at least a little, behind the people and technologies they are designed to catch.
That's one thing too.
Perhaps in some sense, at least for now, it is up to us, creators and consumers of content, founders and users of platforms.
That's very true as well. When you think about things like, I've been thinking about that a lot lately as far as like in America, we have a bit of a housing crisis right now because we have these like investment companies that are buying up houses. And it's hard for people to buy houses in America, like a normal citizen, to compete against an investment company who has access to a bunch of money, right? And this started happening like big time, like, you know, whatever it was, like 2020, 2021 or whatever, like the boom started where they're like, why don't we just start buying these houses and then we can just start renting them out, and it's a great investment. Property is has always been one of the best investments because it's one of the most limited things. Eventually you're going to cap out, right? Especially in certain areas where people want to be. But like, yes, it's a problem, and it grew so much, so fast that it's like so hard to get back in order. Because like right now we're still, even though we know it's affecting, our country in America big time, in a big way. Our rent has gone up, mortgages are getting crazy, and it's like really hard for us to compete. But by the time we do something, like, man, so much damage will have already been done. And that's always going to be the case. And something that's growing, like we know technology grows at like this exponential speed, faster than most other things, where it's like, how could you, keep up with the regulations and stuff that are needed? Because all over the place, things are just happening, and, the things that need to be regulated are changing so fast.
There's a famous saying that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. A more up-to-date version of this might be that we are the average of the 5 creators and 5 content categories we spend the most time on the internet consuming. Arguably, now and into the future, making decisions about what we do and engage with on the internet will be as crucial as the decisions we make regarding our friends and associates.
She looks
Of course,
sad.
in some
That's one thing, though. This music, she looks sad. I was driving somebody in an Uber the other day, and they were just in the back seat just laughing, and we're so freaking happy watching TikTok. And he's like, I'm going to get out of here. He's like, I'm going to go home. He's like, it's going to be so hard for me to go to bed because I'm just going to want to keep watching TikTok. And he's having so much fun. And you're like, well, it's not like this lady who's sitting at the laptop all sad. Like, people are enjoying this. And sometimes, where I dropped this person off, it was a pretty low income area. And it's like, dang, some people, they didn't have this, might be kind of sad. I mean, also might be able to focus more on getting out of certain situations too. But also, it's just to say that, the doom and gloom of like, oh man, so sad looking at my computer. I'm just a piece of an algorithm. You're like, but it's an algorithm that can be fun, like if you're into hunting, wow, the algorithm's going to pull you and show you a lot of cool hunting stuff. If you're into movies and TV, like, okay, cool, same thing, art, whatever, it doesn't mean that it's always just like all the media that you're going to get force-fed and you're not going to like as much.
Since this has always been the case, and determining what media we consume has always been crucial. But crucial is a spectrum, and now it is highly. Ultimately, who cares if the dead internet theory is true or not? Who cares if the old internet is dead or not? What matters, arguably, is whether we can and will sustain what matters in new ways in the new conditions of the world and technology. And what matters is what matters to us, our humanity at its truest and deepest levels. As humans, we want to create, communicate, and connect with each other, unabridged and unbridled. We want reasonably healthy and sustainable relationships with others, with ourselves, and with the networks of the world, both physical and digital. We want honesty, we want genuineness, we want symbiosis, we want prosperity. The internet is and can still be a place where this happens. Of course, there will always be the spam cafes, and spam will likely find its way on most menus, and most of us will likely indulge in it on occasion. But like everything else, with discipline, hope, and effort, we can still eat healthy diets. We can still build beautiful restaurants and eateries and communities with minimal spam on the menus. We can still break bread together in meaningful ways. In the words of Conti, the hardest lesson I have learned as a creative person and as an operator and CEO over the last 10 years is to know and trust what I want and to be true to that over time. It's easier said than done, but don't let somebody else tell you what you want, because then you'll end up with what they want instead of what you want.
Wow.
On a somewhat more direct, hazardous level, one problem area where spam inevitably shows up for all of us is junk messages. Emails, robocalls, texts, physical mail, and so on. This sort of spam, however, is not just annoying and bad tasting, but it can actually be dangerous. It can lead not only to relentless junk mail, but also to parties knowing sensitive information about you, which can lead to things like identity theft, scams, stalking, or harassment. That's why this video sponsor, Incogni, a personal information removal service, is such a fantastic fit for this video, and such a fantastic service in general.
What is it?
The reason for the widespread experience of unsolicited, repeated junk mail is because of what are known as data brokers. without you knowing or giving permission. Every time you buy something or fill something out with your information, your name, social security number, login credentials, home address, and so on, the information can then be taken and sold to and by a third party. There
That's
are
messed
hundreds
up.
of data brokers and people search sites who make lots of money doing this. They harvest and collect your data, not to sell things to you, but to sell you to others. In the last few
T-Mobile's
years,
given away
I've
my
personally
data like
noticed
1,000
huge
times by
increase
being
in
hacked.
scam-like texts, as well as an email inbox that is nearly impossible to sift through.
Mm.
The good news, legally, you have the right to stop this and have all your information removed from these sites. The bad news, it's essentially impossible to do this on your own. The better good news, Incogni makes it not only possible, but easy for you. All you have to do is go through a short sign-up process, give Incogni permission to work on your behalf, and then they immediately locate and reach out to these brokers and sites and get your information removed.
Via algorithms.
As you might imagine, getting your information removed once might not last forever and might not be a smooth process. But with Incogni's annual plan, they continue to automatically follow up to ensure that your information not only gets removed, but stays removed. You can then track Incogni's progress right on their dashboard as you watch these companies inevitably lose. Click my link in the description or go to incogni.com/pursuitofwonder and you'll get 60% off Incogni's annual plan. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.
All right. There we go. Pursuit of Wonder. That was pretty good. It was essentially what I thought it was, but he really laid it out and described it pretty good, and also makes me feel pretty hopeless. So that's good. All right. Thanks for watching.